Get out, you're useless. She screamed at me to get out of the house I paid for. She called me useless in front of my own grandchildren. So I packed 2 suitcases, didn't say a single word, and walked out into the cold. She thought I'd be back within a week, crying, begging for my old room back. What she didn't know was that I'd already made 1 phone call before I even reached the end of the driveway. A phone call that would bring her entire world crashing down in exactly 48 hours. My name is Barbara, I am 76 years old. And this is the story of how staying silent was the loudest thing I ever did. Before I go on, if you're the kind of person who believes quiet dignity beats a screaming match every single time, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want more stories like mine, because there are plenty more where this came from. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. And it warms this old heart to know how far these words travel. Now let me tell you what happened in my house. I want you to picture a woman my age. Gray hair pinned back the way it's been pinned back for 50 years. Hands that raised 1 son alone after my husband passed when the boy was only 9. Hands that scrubbed floors at the diner on Route 9 for 11 years so that boy could go to college. I never remarried. I never complained. I built a life out of what I was given, and when my son Ethan told me 3 years ago that he and his wife were struggling, that the mortgage was eating them alive, that the twins needed braces, that they might lose the house, I didn't hesitate for 1 second. I sold my house. The house my husband and I bought in 1974, the house where Ethan took his first steps, the house I'd paid off with sweat and double shifts. I sold it, and I handed my son a check for $180,000. Not a loan. A gift. I told him, "This is yours, sweetheart. Just let your old mother have a room, and I'll never be a burden." He cried when I gave him that check. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. His wife, Kimberly, kissed my cheek and told me I was an angel sent from heaven. That's what she called me. An angel. That lasted about 4 months. I moved into the small room above their garage. I didn't ask for much. I cooked dinner most nights, I picked the twins up from school, I folded laundry. I kept my mouth shut when Kimberly redecorated the entire downstairs with money that used to be mine. I told myself that's what family does. You give and you don't count the cost. But somewhere in that second year, something changed in that house. Kimberly stopped looking at me like family and started looking at me like furniture that had overstayed its welcome. She'd sigh loudly when I walked into a room. She'd talk about me to her friends on the phone, not even bothering to lower her voice, saying things like she just sits up there all day. I don't know what Ethan expects me to do with her. My own son started avoiding my eyes at the dinner table. I told myself it was stress. I told myself people say things they don't mean when they're tired. I have spent my whole life finding reasons to forgive people who never once apologized to me. Then came that Tuesday evening in March. I had made a pot roast, Ethan's favorite since he was 6 years old, and I set the table the way I always did, with the good napkins because I like things to feel special even on an ordinary night. Kimberly came home late, and she was in one of her moods. I didn't ask questions. I never asked questions anymore. I'd learned it wasn't worth the sighing. She sat down, looked at the plate I'd made her and said, "I don't even know why I'm eating this." "You know what, Barbara? I don't know why you're even still here." I said nothing. I just kept eating. That's when she stood up. She slammed both hands on the table so hard the water glasses jumped. And in front of my 2 grandchildren, Lily was 11, little Cole was only 8, she pointed her finger at me and screamed the words that are the reason you're watching this video right now. "Get out. You're useless. You sit up there in that room doing nothing, contributing nothing, and I am sick and tired of carrying you. This is my house and I want you out." Her house. I sat there for a moment. I looked at my grandchildren's frightened little faces. I looked at my son who, and this is the part that still sits in my chest like a stone, said absolutely nothing. He looked down at his plate. 31 years old. And my boy could not find the courage to defend the woman who sold everything she owned so he could keep a roof over his head. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry, though God knows I wanted to. I folded my napkin, the way my own mother taught me to do even in the worst moments, and I said very quietly, "All right, Kimberly. I'll be out by morning." And I meant it. That night I packed 2 suitcases. I didn't slam a single drawer. I didn't wake the children to say goodbye because I didn't want them carrying that memory. I left a small envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside it was a photograph of Ethan as a little boy, sitting on my lap on the porch of the house I used to own, the house that no longer existed because I'd given it away for people who screamed at me over pot roast. I called my dear friend Eleanor, a widow like me who lives 20 minutes away in a little cottage by the lake, and I asked if I could stay with her a few days. She didn't ask a single question. She just said, "Barbara, honey, I'll have the porch light on." But before I even got in the car, standing in that cold driveway with my breath fogging in the March air, I made one more phone call. I want you to remember this moment, because everything that happened next traces back to it. I called a man named Mr. Whitfield, my attorney, a patient, careful man who had handled my late husband's estate decades ago, and who I still trusted with anything that mattered. I said, "David, it's Barbara. I need you to do something for me first thing tomorrow morning, and I need you to do it exactly the way we discussed 6 months ago, in case this day ever came." You see, here is something Kimberly never knew. Something even my own son didn't fully understand. When I gave Ethan that check for $180,000, his mortgage lender required a cosigner because of some trouble with his credit after a rough patch a few years back. I was the cosigner. My name was on that loan just as much as his. And more than that, because I am not a foolish old woman, whatever Kimberly thinks. 6 months before that dinner, after one too many cold looks and cutting comments from my daughter-in-law, I had quietly gone to see Mr. Whitfield, just in case. I told him I had a strange feeling in my gut, the kind a mother gets, that something was shifting in that house and I might need to protect myself. Together, we had drawn up the paperwork to formally file for release of my name from that mortgage co-signature, a process that, once triggered, forces the bank to reevaluate the entire loan based on Ethan and Kimberly's income alone. Without my name backing it, without my near-perfect credit history holding the whole thing steady, the loan would no longer qualify under the terms they'd originally been approved for. It's called a cosigner release clause, and I had it drafted and ready to file the moment I decided I truly had enough. That night in the driveway, I told Mr. Whitfield to file it first thing in the morning. I drove to Eleanor's cottage. I slept in her guest room under a quilt her mother made in 1962. And for the first time in almost 2 years, nobody sighed when I walked into a room. Nobody made me feel small. I cried a little, I won't pretend I didn't. Even a 76-year-old heart can still break, but underneath the tears there was something else. A quiet, settled peace. The peace of a woman who had finally stopped begging to be wanted. 2 days went by. Eleanor and I drank tea on her porch and watched the geese on the lake. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't call Kimberly. I didn't post a single word about it anywhere. I simply lived quietly, the way I should have been allowed to live in my son's house all along. Then, on the second evening, my phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was shaking so badly I almost didn't recognize it. "Mom," he said, "Mom, I need you to explain something to me. The bank just called. They said there's a problem with the mortgage, some kind of cosigner release filing, and they're saying if it goes through, we don't qualify for the loan anymore on our own. They're talking about the whole thing being called due, or we have to refinance in 30 days at almost double the interest rate we're paying now. Mom, we can't afford that. We'll lose the house. Mom, what is happening?" I let the silence sit there for just a moment, long enough for him to hear his own panic echoing back at him. Then I said calmly, the way I'd say it if he'd asked me about the weather, "Ethan, sweetheart, I removed my name from the loan. I'm not able to co-sign a mortgage for a house I was just screamed out of by your wife. It didn't feel right. Being financially responsible for a home I'm not welcome in." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mom, please," he said, and I could hear him starting to cry, "this grown man, my baby boy. Please, you have to fix this. We can't lose the house. The kids." And here is where I said the thing I had been holding inside me for 2 years, the thing that had built up like water behind a dam. "Ethan," I said, "I sold my home. My home, the one your father and I built our whole life in. I gave you every dollar from it because you told me you were desperate, and I believed that family helps family. I moved into a room above your garage and I made myself smaller and smaller so I wouldn't be a bother to anyone. And 3 nights ago, your wife stood up at my dinner table in front of my grandchildren and told me I was useless and told me to get out of, her words, her house. And you, my only son, sat there and said absolutely nothing." He was sobbing now. I could hear Kimberly's voice in the background, shrill and frantic, asking what was going on, demanding the phone. "I am not trying to punish you," I told him, and this part was true, every word of it. I am simply no longer willing to financially protect people who have made it clear I am not wanted. If Kimberly believes it's her house, then she is welcome to qualify for that mortgage on her own income. I wish you both the very best of luck. And then, my darlings, I did something I have never done in my entire life. I hung up the phone on my own son. The calls kept coming that night. 17 missed calls, if you can believe it, between Ethan and Kimberly both. I let every single one go to voicemail. Eleanor sat beside me on that porch, held my hand and said, "You raised that boy right, Barbara. Now it's time he learns to stand up like a man, and it's time she learns some manners." The next morning, Ethan showed up at Eleanor's cottage. Alone. No Kimberly. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, and honestly, looking at his face, I don't think he had. He stood on that porch and he cried in a way I hadn't seen since he was a little boy who'd skinned his knee. He apologized. Truly apologized. Not the kind of quick, easy sorry mom people toss around, but a real reckoning for staying silent at that table, for letting years pass while his wife chipped away at my dignity piece by piece, for taking my sacrifice and treating it like it was owed to him rather than given out of love. I listened. I let him say every word. And when he finished, I told him the truth. I loved him, I would always love him, but I would not be going back to that house. Not now, not ever. I told him if he wanted a relationship with his mother, it would happen on ground where I was respected, my own ground, wherever that turned out to be. As for the mortgage, I want you to know I am not a cruel woman, whatever some of you might think after hearing all this. I did not leave my son and my grandchildren out on the street. Mr. Whitfield and I worked out an arrangement. I agreed to help Ethan refinance, but only in his name alone this time, with terms that protected him and, more importantly, protected my grandchildren, who never asked to be part of any of this. Kimberly's name, however, I insisted, would not appear anywhere near that deed. Not after what she did. Kimberly never called me. Not once. Not even after Ethan told her the truth about how close they'd come to losing everything. I understand some people simply cannot bring themselves to say 4 small words. I was wrong, Barbara. That's all right. I've stopped waiting on apologies that were never going to come. I used a portion of what remained from my savings, and with Eleanor's blessing, I rented the little cottage 2 doors down from hers by the lake. It's small. It's mine. Nobody sighs when I enter a room. I have my own porch light now, and some evenings I sit out there with a cup of tea and I watch the sun go down over that water, and I think about how close I came to disappearing into that garage room forever, quietly shrinking myself down to nothing just to keep the peace. Lily and Cole visit me every other weekend. Ethan drives them himself. We bake cookies, we feed the ducks, and slowly, carefully, my son and I are rebuilding something honest between us. Something that isn't built on my silence anymore. I am 76 years old. And it took me until this year to learn that being a good mother does not mean allowing yourself to be treated like nothing. It does not mean handing over your whole life and accepting humiliation as the interest payment. Real love, the kind worth giving everything for, does not require you to disappear. So if anyone out there watching this tonight is sitting in a house where you feel small, where you feel like you're being tolerated instead of loved, I want you to hear this old woman say it plainly. You are not useless. You are not a burden. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not raise your voice at all. Sometimes you simply pack your bags, make one quiet phone call, and let the truth do the shouting for you. If this story meant something to you tonight, please hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and down in the comments, tell me where in the world you're watching from. I truly love reading every single one of your messages. Thank you for sitting with an old woman and her story tonight. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never, ever let anyone convince you that you are less than you are.